Hey, everyone. All right, so this video I want to talk about the recap of last few days short on SPY and also on Friday the Nvidia trade and what we can learn from it for uh, um, next time when this setup presents itself, and also how can we stay in the trade longer, get in and out again, and a couple other things. I mentioned that this was my A plus setup. This was on 15th of April. So I want to go quickly over this and why this is a A plus setup for me, and A plus short setup for me, and like how I structure the trade and what I look for. Okay, so real quick, let's look at the daily chart, right? We have been consolidating on SPY for a long time. We have been consolidating in this range, so it's easy to get faked out, easy to get, like in a mindset that this move is probably going to be a fake out, which we have seen so many times. Massive move down and then go up and then chop. So how do we navigate this as well? So let's look at this first of all. Right, so this was the day when life-changing money could have been made. It was a green day, but still, like this is the day when I alerted SPX swing, if you remember, for next day, and those swings went from, I don't know, like 50.5 to um 400 or something like that. It was a big day, right? So but after that, when you see a move like this, right, and a big move, and when you start to see market, big reversal, right, you get an anchor which is basically around this level, right, 520 in this case. So 520 becomes the anchor, which is also happens to be this around this high order box, right? So this becomes kind of like my anchor for next few days, where I look if the price like doesn't break above this level next session, right, or next to next session, or next to next. It could take a while, right? We don't know that when it will happen. We just assume that there might be a bigger move. So this is how basically what I look for is, um, I'm gonna quickly go over this I already talked about, right? So now you see that we were kind of like starting to make um, lower lows, right? We were starting to make, I mean, like lower highs. So here you can see that we had a higher, this high, right? I will just mark it for you guys so it's easier to understand. So this high, right here, right, and then we start noticing that we are unable to make higher. It's unable to make a higher high. It's unable to register, right? So we're starting to see the trend is starting to shift, right? But still the price is way too choppy. This is not good to hold premiums, right? And then we have a massive gap up day, right? And then we have a gap down day. So this is where things start to go. A day before is what I look for, right? So this was 15th, so this is 14th, right? So this is what I'm looking at right now. So notice details here, which is important. Notice the structure as well. We kind of like gap down, then we again that level which I mentioned, I start to look. I mean, you can also notice the higher day box for last couple of days where is in the same range, right? So if it kind of breaks this bigger, the topmost, right, then yeah, I think like we might have to think about whether it's bullish or not. So it did break this level previous day, but then again next day it gap down. Okay, so first sign that it gap down. Okay, so now let's see what's going on. So here this day we had a gap down, and then we consolidated for next, when the market opened 9:30 to 10 o'clock, we consolidate, we break, and then around 11 o'clock we start to move up. Around 12 o'clock again break down, right, again break down. So this itself was a good trade. Now 15th was the day when I had a plus, but I didn't know that time that it would be a plus, right? So what am I looking at there, right? So overall we gapped up, so that is bullish, right? Overall we gapped up bullish. But then again, the same thing starts to happen. We gap up, consolidate, and then we break the structure. And this move, in case you were in, great, you capitalize that, right? But again, we are looking at what same similar pattern here, right? You can around 11, and this is around 11, starts to consolidate, goes up around 12, 12:10, starts to see reject, right? So this is where I entered short. This is where I entered short. And I was like, I also started a voice call around 12:40. I believe that I started a voice saying that we might have like a really good setup today. And so here's what I was looking at. Overall trend last few days I talked about, right? We are making lower highs, we're unable to break previous structure. Overall market sentiment around those days is that Fed is probably not going to cut. There was Israel news, there was war news as well, there was ASML earnings. So a lot of things were already starting to kind of like not looking favorable for bulls, right? But that's not the most important thing for me. For me at that point of time, what's more important becomes is like on that day, what's the drip A by D, and advance to decline ratio. So my advance to decline ratio is a little bit different than the normal, but you can use the normal. So normal S&P 500 advanced decline is like percent of stocks advancing versus percent of stocks declining. But for me it's more about percent of stocks advancing above 1030 and below 1030 um, low, and above 1030 low. And when I saw the list in my watch list, a lot of stocks were trading below the 1030 low. So that was like another factor in my mind, that I need to keep in mind, that around 1030 was 1030 box would be somewhere around here, right? So already some of the stocks were trading below it, so that's important. And then finally what I was looking for, again, tape and bookmark is also important. So around this time I saw a massive order on SPY, which was sell order, which was way below the existing ask and bid price. It was like, I think it was like $2 below, and I was surprised that what was this, right? And bookmap, again, I was looking at that as well. So these all these things in my mind were there. And then finally I was like, okay, so what is the A plus for me? For me is, again, look at these candle sizes, right? The red ones are massive compared to the green ones, right? Red ones have massive. So when this structure broke, I was already in a short position, right? But then I was like, okay, if we break the low of day box around 1240, between 12:45 to 1:15, that's usually the time I want to see. Like a day before a similar thing, you could have told that, hey drip, like like we had exactly similar setup. But yeah, notice a couple things which are different here, right? We kind of like broke similarly, and then we kind of like we already were breaking at 1:15, we broke low, and then we finally got a reversal here, right? So and then we kind of started chopping the rest of the day. But in this case, how things were different in my mind were that I would have taken the same trade, right? Get short here, and it didn't really go that much down, but I would have taken the same trade, but with the short right here, the higher box, low of the box high, right? So this is a 5 point difference on SPX. On SPY it's like, what, 50 cents, right? So yeah, this is what it was, and this is where I kind of sized up when I saw this reversal bar, right? This is where I added more, and this is where I also alerted you guys that, hey, we might see a massive move down. And I mean, just in a matter of like 15 minutes we were already down big, right? And I also said, one thing I remember was that once you see this kind of move and a structure has been broken, in this case this structure here, right? It was kind of holding this support 510, 509 level, and it broke that. I say the next few days we might start to see more downside, and we might not even be able to go back up. And I mean, this is the same thing happened, right? Like you can see here, this structure here, 506 again, unable to break. And then the next day we could have traded same thing, right? This structure broke, and then choppy down day, though not the best trading environment for me. And then this is like similarly 1250 starts to reverse. So you gotta pay attention, because around that time, if you already are at the low of the day, way away far from this, right, you want to start a short position around this area. And then if it doesn't go in your favor, you cut it right here, right? Because if, let's say, you added the same thing, you thought that, oh yeah, it went up and then it will dump, right? You could have entered a short position here with the stop here and it would have been fine, but we already got that A plus setup, right? That my point being here is that you never know when the A plus setup will execute, so you have to um, prepare yourself. Like, today could be that day, tomorrow could be that day, it could be that day. And then finally again the same thing happened, right? Like, we hired a box again, getting rejected, goes down, and its trend has been down, right? So now this is basically my A plus, right? So now let's look at this same exact thing and look at Nvidia, right? The only difference would be, right, uh, I'm not hyper focused on A by D ratio because it's just a single stock, right? So for Nvidia it's the same thing. Let's look at 30-minute chart for Nvidia, right? We have been bouncing around this 825 to 830, 825, 830 to 835 level, the gap, right? First bounce here, second bounce here, third bounce here, fourth bounce, and then it went down, bounced again. So it's like an important level for Nvidia, we know it already. Like, so that area has been marked on our chart. Right now, let's go to the 5-minute chart on Friday. So what was the catalyst for Nvidia? We already had some big sell off on the ASML news day, right? But then started to chop. But again, we SMCI was already down 11% when Nvidia was chopping around during the day. We were already short, and the Israel news came, it went down pre-market, it was down pre-market, and then it bounced in the at the open. But let's see what happened, right? Same thing here, it's rejecting around the consolidation here. So you enter, where would you enter short, right? Like, once you break this level, right, you could enter here, the flag break, you could enter here with the stop of this. But again, not at that time we didn't know that it would go down that much, but things were starting to look shaky with whole sector that time, right? So my thesis was again like, okay, around 10:40, 11 we start to see some kind of bounce. So I entered a short position here, and I covered it kind of here, like a small scalp here, basically. But Nvidia premium were moving really nice. So then I entered short again here, thinking that, oh, low of day box broke, but then started to chop. I got stopped out. But then again, when I saw that it, again, look at this, like, loaded box, it bounced around, came back. This is where I started to think, things starting to look fishy again here in Nvidia. We saw this kind of, and then when I saw this rejection, I entered again my short position. And I also told that, I'm entering the 780 put lotto, which at that time it already, I scalped this, and then I was like, okay, I think like I was in a higher premium trading, like 800 put, so I already scalped it. But then I was like, okay, I need to lower the risk, because at this point of time it's still looking choppy, right? But then again, you can never guess it, right? That's why it's always like, you have to be in that position, you have to have that conviction in the trade. So I was there, and I had 30 contracts of those. But when I saw this massive move down, and I kind of started covering my position here, I mean, this 785 was the level I was already watching. So it already went in the money for me at this point. Around this point I scaled out, and I mean, it went below 780, it went more down, and I just stick to my trade plan. And I mean, I could have entered here and I could have gotten back, right? It was a little shaky at that time point of time. So this was the meat of the move, was right on this, right? Like, when it testing the cloud, you could have had stop tight would be this level of the cloud. There are many ways, right? You can trade. Another way to look at this would be, I was looking at this trend which never broke. So again, this trend line could have been your stop if you were trading lottos or anything, right? Or some other expiration. I had next week's expiration as well. So again, many ways to manage your risk. It depends on your risk tolerance, right? And but the setup, the core idea is the same, right? Like these kind of setups always kind of have two kind of outcomes when I've seen, like either it starts to chop around out the box, but when it sees something like that break, right? When you see negative sentiment in the market, you see other SMCI, AVGO, ASML, AMD, other names kind of like start to sell off. You have to pay attention, right? And also our core level here, which I told you guys, right? We broke that 830 level, which again was a sign that things are looking shaky. It's starting to hold near that level. So anyway, this is what I wanted to talk about. Hope you guys learned something new.